Welcome to another episode of On This Day. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and on this day, December the 25th, 1971, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins played the longest game in NFL history. Now, this was a holiday game, the chance to advance, all eyes on the Miami Dolphins, except this game was in 1971, of course, because that doesn't happen nowadays. And there are football games epic for their historical importance. There are football games epic just for what happened on the field. Now, this is something that was epic for both. And these two teams battled in the mud at Kansas City's Municipal Stadium and played the longest game ever. So this game could easily be subtitled Christmas Dinner Delayed. Now, after 82 minutes and 40 seconds, more than 5.5 quarters, Garo Yepremian gave the Dolphins a 27-24 victory with a 37-yard field goal in a game that went on and had so many crazy, terrible, and yet wonderful things happen leading up to the game-winning kick that the game stands by itself as a classic, but it had significance above and beyond. It proved to be a watershed event for both franchises, the end of an era for the Chiefs and the start of one for the Dolphins. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, for most of the decade before this game, were one of the greatest teams in NFL history. The 1969 Chiefs had won the Super Bowl by dominating the Kansas City Chiefs 23-7. They were almost 3 touchdown underdogs, but the Kansas City Chiefs were not given the credit deserved because they were in the old AFL. Now, this Chiefs team was one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest defenses of all time. You had Len Dawson at quarterback, Ed Podolak at running back. The defense was loaded with guys like Willie Buchanan, and the list goes on and on. Now, after this playoff game, the Kansas City Chiefs would not return to the playoffs until 1986, when they would battle the New York Jets in a wild card playoff game they would eventually lose. The Miami Dolphins, on the other hand, had traded for head coach Don Shula to get him away from the Baltimore Colts a year before this. And Shula, within a couple of years, had this franchise turned around. And the Dolphins would go on to play in 3 straight Super Bowls after this, winning Super Bowl 7 and 8. Super Bowl 7, of course, with an undefeated season. In Super Bowl 8, they would beat the Minnesota Vikings. And Don Shula would go on to be one of the winningest coaches in NFL history, still the winningest coach in NFL history until Bill Belichick tops that in a few years. Now, you might learn some things about the game you never knew today, like the Chiefs' fake field goal attempt that was so convincing it faked out the center and cost his team a sure touchdown and victory in regulation. Like the Dolphins quarterback Bob Greasy forgot about in the heat of battle, but remembered just in time to use and set up Yepremian for his decisive boot. Like Garo hiding from 20,000 madly celebrating Dolphins in police headquarters beneath Miami International Airport, among the team's return, shipping champagne with the cops until 4 a.m. when it was finally safe to leave. Like Don Shula finding his car battery dead and being forced to hitchhike home from the airport with his son David after this historical game. But first things first, let's put things in perspective. The Dolphins were 10-3-1 and AFC East champions for the first time. They were making their second playoff appearance, having lost as a wild card entry to Oakland Raiders the year before. They were young, feisty, and on the rise in their second season under young coach Don Shula. But few gave them a chance against the Kansas City Chiefs, who were 10-3-1 and AFC West champs. Super Bowl winners, as I said 2 years earlier, the Chiefs were a team loaded with veteran stars. They had been a power for years. They were 6-0 against the Dolphins head-to-head series, and were favored to make it 7-0. Coach Hank Stram still says that the 1971 edition was the best Chiefs team of them all. And finally, as if that wasn't incentive enough, there was a sentimental importance to winning for the Chiefs. It was to be their last game in Municipal Stadium. The next year they would play in the brand spanking new Arrowhead Stadium. They very much wanted to go out on a winning note at Municipal. They should have won. They took the lead 3 times only to see the Dolphins come back 3 times. They would have won if perhaps the greatest kicker in NFL history, Jan Stenerud, didn't miss a chip shot field goal from 32 yards with 35 seconds left in regulation. He also missed a 29-yarder and a 42-yarder was blocked. In all, perhaps the worst day of his legendary NFL 13-year Hall of Fame career. Now, almost 18 years later, the memory still rankles Stenerud, who's now an architect in Kansas City. He said, "I have no interest in talking about that game. After all these years, it still comes up. It's past history. I have no comment." The Chiefs could have, should have, but didn't win. With grit and luck and determination, the Dolphins did. The Dolphins went on to make the first of 3 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, while the Chiefs, of course, got old overnight. Now, interestingly enough, in 1972, the Chiefs' first opponent in Arrowhead for their first game at the new stadium was Miami. Miami won 20-10, and that started the only perfect season in NFL history. But the turning point for both teams and franchises really was Christmas Day, 1971. It was unseasonably warm, 63 degrees in Kansas City as the teams prepared for the 4 p.m. kickoff. Before the game, Yepremian, in his second season with the Dolphins, found Stenerud and congratulated him for having just been selected the AFC's Pro Bowl kicker. But inside, Yepremian seethed. He had led the NFL in scoring in 1971, and he deserved this honor. Jan had a great career, and if ever they put a kicker in the Hall of Fame, he should be the one, Yepremian later said. But that year, I felt I should have gotten a shot at it. He had been picked so many times. Now, of course, we know that if you've been picked a lot, it's going to take a while for somebody to supplant you. Now, at first it didn't seem the kickers were going to play a deciding role. Kansas City, as expected, scored in its first 2 possessions to take a 10-0 lead and had 4th down on the Miami 22 in the second quarter with Stenerud seemingly set to make it 13-0. Actually 17-0. The Chiefs had noted how the Dolphins likely to put on a kamikaze rush to block kicks. So, Hank Stram, the coach for the Chiefs, decided to call a fake. The ball would be snapped directly to Stenerud, who was a great athlete with everything I've read, a 4.6 40, and he would sprint around the end behind 2 pulling guards. Now, Stram later recalled, "I told Jan, you've got a good actor and you've got to be a good actor and make it look like you're going to kick." Anyways, we're on the right hash mark. Everyone on the sideline is psyched. We know we're going to score a touchdown. Bobby Bell, our center, looks through his legs and sees Jan looking down at the spot like he normally would, which is exactly what we wanted him to do. But it was so convincing, Bell thinks Jan missed the call. He's afraid to snap the ball to him, so he snaps it to the holder, Lenny Dawson. Lenny, of course, was surprised. Jan surprised. Lenny puts it down and takes a swipe at it and just misses to the right of the post. Meanwhile, both our guards are all alone on the right. I mean, there wasn't a soul out there with them. It would have been a certain touchdown. Dawson said he was dumbfounded when the ball came to him. I asked Bell why he snapped it to me, and he said because it didn't look like Jan was ready to catch it. Dawson said, I said, did you expect him to put out his arms? If the Chiefs had taken a 17-0 lead, they might have very well won going away. So all those ifs and mights just didn't happen. And the Dolphins tied the score 10-10 by halftime. It proved the pattern of the game. The Chiefs went ahead 17-10 midway through the third quarter. The Dolphins tied it 17-all with a minute to play in the period. The Chiefs took the lead for the third time, 24-17. Halfway through the fourth quarter, the Dolphins tied it 24-24 with a gritty drive in the closing minutes, highlighted by a 3rd and 13 greasy completion to Hall of Fame wide receiver Paul Warfield for 17 yards to the Kansas City 44. There was only 1:36 left when Greasy found Marv Fleming in the end zone from 5 yards out. But the Dolphins' celebration died in their throats, and Podolak, who was unbelievable that day with 350 all-purpose yards, took Yepremian's ensuing kickoff at the goal line, started up the middle, cut sharply left through a mass of bodies, and found himself in the clear with all the Yepremian standing between him and the goal line. I had a choice, run over to Kangaroo or run around him, said Podolak, who with a measure of contempt calls all kickers Kangaroo. I cut hard left to avoid him and started down the left sideline. But the time it took gave Curtis Johnson the angle to catch me. I tried to get him to commit to where I could cut back behind him, but he played it very smart and kept forcing me towards the sideline. I've looked at the film at least 50 times to see if there was anything I could have done different, but there really wasn't. The kangaroo remembers the panic of being alone with Podolak. I thought, you've got to do something, or this whole season's down the drain, Yepremian said. He didn't do much. He just gotten away long enough to enable Johnson to push Podolak out of bounds at the Miami 22. Not that it seemed to matter. Stenerud could hit from that distance, blindfolded. No one on either side doubted that the game was over. The Chiefs ran 3 plays. 35 seconds remained when Stenerud came in to kick. No one on either side thought he was going to miss. Greasy remembers thinking, it's over. Stram says, my only thought was to make sure it didn't get blocked. Shula felt helpless and said, it was out of our hands. The snap was good, the placement was good. The kick was long enough, high enough, but wide right. Talk about huge psychological swings. They don't come any bigger than what this was or what this game had in it. Now, Podolak had said, I was ready to take it to the shower after Jan missed. I had already put in a full day's work. That really was knuckles in the face to me. It was a seductive whisper to Dolphins' ears. It was like the football gods telling you, we're going to help you, Greasy said. It was like, geez, another chance? We went to overtime. The Chiefs won the toss and promptly threatened again when lineman Buck Buchanan lateraled Yepremian's short kick to Podolak, who returned to his 46. They moved it to Miami 35, setting up a 42-yard field goal attempt by Stenerud. This time the Dolphins' kamikaze pass rush, or run block rush, proved a game saver. Nick Buttaconte broke through and blocked the kick. Yet another chance for the Dolphins. The Dolphins got their first shot at victory later in the first overtime period, but Yepremian just missed a 52-yarder to the left. Whenever I'd miss, I'd say to myself, no way am I going to miss another. You only get a certain number of chances, so you've got to fight back. I hit that one well. I hoped I'd get another chance. The first overtime came to an end. Back and forth it went. Tension and drama built as the game passed a time barrier never before crossed. Up until this time, the longest pro football game in AFL marathon in 1962 between the Houston Oilers and the Dallas Texans, later the Kansas City Chiefs, had lasted 77 minutes and 54 seconds. The winning coach of the Texans that day was, of course, none other than Hank Stram. During one Dolphins defensive stand in the first OT, Greasy, the Brady quarterback, went over his charts on the sideline, searching for something, anything that might pop for a long game. He noticed a Larry Zonka run, a misdirection play, before they were popular. Now, it was a call for Zonka to take a handoff, start right before going the other way behind Larry Little and Norm Evans. But we knew the Chiefs would be looking for it, so I desperately didn't call it in the first half, Greasy said. Then I got so wrapped up in the game, I completely forgot about it. I had my clipboard in my hand during the first overtime, looking at all of our plays. And when I saw it, I thought, damn, I haven't used this play. I have to keep this in mind to run it at the right time. The right time came early in the second OT, when the Dolphins faced a 2nd and 5 from their 35. Dawson called it a sucker play. It sure suckered the Chiefs. Zalka rebelled 29 yards to the Kansas City 36. 3 runs later, the ball on the 30, in came Yepremian. Truthfully, I felt a lot more confident with Stenerud than I did Garrow, Greasy said. Garrow had just come in off the bus from Detroit, while Jan was already established as a great kicker. Garrow had more to prove. Yepremian would say, I couldn't help but think of what had happened to Stenerud and pray it wouldn't happen to me. As I ran out onto the field, I kept saying to myself, I can make it, I can make it. The ball felt very good off my foot. I started for the sideline and stopped. I thought, it's so quiet. Maybe I missed. No, it was quiet because he didn't miss. You never heard such silence, if that's not a contradiction, Dawson later said. Such pressure, such tension. Everyone was completely drained. The guys who hadn't played much went crazy in the locker room, Greasy said. The guys who had played were glowing but too tired to show it. The normally verbose Hank Stram was shocked into silence. It felt like someone had put a vacuum cleaner over my mouth and sucked everything out, he said. I had nothing left emotionally. But I couldn't sleep that whole night replaying the game in my mind over and over again. Finally, I remembered something Andy Gustafsson told me when I became head coach of the Dallas Texans. He said, if you stay in this crazy business long enough, sooner or later everything will happen to you. You will win games you shouldn't and lose games you shouldn't. And some things just aren't meant to be. That was my final thought. Hell, it just wasn't meant to be. Dolphin Mania engulfed Miami. A huge crowd headed for the airport to greet the team. Among the would-be greeters was Yepremian's wife. She saw all the traffic and police and asked an officer if there had been an accident, Garrow recalled. And the officer said to my wife, no, lady. Haven't you heard? The Dolphins won. She identified herself and got a police escort in. But the Yepremians couldn't get out until the wee hours, when the cops faked the crowd out by announcing Garrow had already gone home. While waiting, the Yepremians sipped the bubbly with their protectors, the police. When we got home, they had decorated our house and the whole street with signs like, we're number one and thanks Garrow. They had painted the street. The next day, we had a block party, Yepremian recalled. Meanwhile, Coach Don Shula was having problems getting out of the airport. Not even Shula's glare and chin would restore life to his battery. So he and his son, David, then 21, hit the road with their thumbs out. Here's how Shula told it in his biography, The Winning Edge. The first car that recognized or approached stopped. The woman who was sitting on the passenger side in the front seat recognized me. I asked her if she was going towards Miami Lakes. She said no, but she would take me any place I wanted to go. So David and I got into the car. There was another couple in the back seat. We all headed to my home with the horns of 100 cars blaring away. I invited them into the house for a Christmas drink. Naturally, we began talking football and replayed a game against the Chiefs over and over. All these years later, the game's still being replayed. It's one of the few football games to earn a title. One that instantly identifies it. So, on this day, Christmas Day, December the 25th, 1971, the game that would never end, the longest game in NFL history was played. The Miami Dolphins winning on a Garrow Yepremian field goal, 27-24. Thanks again, guys, for listening to On This Day. I want to tell everybody Merry Christmas on this Christmas Day. I hope that you got everything you wanted underneath the tree, and I hope that you guys will be back tomorrow for December 26th on this day on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. So, for myself, Mike Goodpastor, you've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.